Testing, 1, 2, 3. Hey, everybody. Here I am again. Welcome to VYG. Glad that you're here. If you don't already, follow us on Instagram. Check us out. That's where updates and information is. Put the Instagram up. You got it? You got it, my man? There it is. VYG students, follow us. There's announcements. Everything that's happening is up there. And encouraging content. Who needs more encouraging content in their life? I do. I know everybody here does. So get on that if you aren't. Well, I'm glad that you're here tonight. I've got a couple of quick announcements, and then we have our missionary guests here, the Brooks family. Yeah. Well, slow down on the clapping. You don't want to get tired when they actually come up. I want a big clap then, okay? But just a couple quick announcements. Next Wednesday, we're going to start a new series called Bad Advice, and it's going to be all about the voices that we hear on a regular basis and how we need to resist some of those voices. I'm talking about temptation. Sometimes temptation comes in and it's like, you really want this, you really need this. But really, it's bad advice. And we need to listen to God's word, his truth. Sometimes it's our own flesh, our own desires speak to us. It's bad advice. And then there's times where our friends, maybe influencers, people around us give us really bad advice. And we need to listen to the wisdom of elders and people in our lives that God has blessed. And so bad advice starting next Wednesday. It's going to be really good. It's going to help you navigate your life, and it's going to be good. Speed to Light. Who loves Speed to Light? Who's excited about Speed to Light? Come on. Yeah. Can we put the total from last year up on the screen? $7,910.22. Give yourselves a round of applause. Come on. That was a $6,000 increase over the year before, okay? So I'm really proud of you guys. That was awesome. And we are just getting started with Speed to Light and raising money for missionaries. Because if you don't know what Speed to Light is, it is a youth, it is the youth missions arm of the Assemblies of God. And basically what it does is it's youth all over New Jersey raising money to purchase vehicles and sound equipment and other AV equipment for missionaries out on the field, okay? Churches pay for missionaries to live, but a lot of times they get out there and they still need stuff. You know what I'm saying? And so Speed to Light, there's no other plan B. This is the way that the Assemblies of God raises money for these necessities. And so it's you guys. You guys did an awesome job last year. I'm so proud of you. And so we're going to go for it again this year. And we already started. We did a bake sale, and we already have so far, next slide, $820.80. So we're off to a great start. You know, guys, we didn't start raising anything last year until like April, I think. I don't think we started until April last year. So imagine what God can do through you this year as we raise money. And that leads me into the announcement for this Friday. We have our Speed to Light rally. It's our section. There's a bunch of other youth groups coming together. It's going to be at Chestnut Assembly of God at 6:30 p.m. There's free pizza, and we are meeting there, okay? So don't show up here. Chestnut Assembly of God, Google it. It's easy to find. And free pizza if you come, tons of games, and we're going to hear a really encouraging message and be inspired to give to missions this year. We're also going to set our goal together for what we want our goal to be. So I encourage you this Friday to be here for that. Jared, is there anything else? Oh, this Sunday after church, second service, we just wrapped up all those little slips of paper, right? Give yourselves a hand. Thank you for doing that. They're not as excited about the piece of paper as the money. But on Sunday, we're actually going to put the eggs together. And so those pieces of paper, if you didn't already understand, it goes into an Easter egg with some candy. And that's going to be our invite to invite people to church on Easter Sunday. And so literally, that could change somebody's life. And because it's an Easter egg and because it's candy, people are like, yeah, I guess I'll take it. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you give them a brochure. They're like, I don't know what you know. But you give them an Easter egg with candy, and it's like, here, I just want to bless you. It's an invite to my church, but there's some candy in there. They'll check it out. So, but we're going to put them together, finish putting them together Sunday after church, after second service. So if you come to first service, come back around 12:30, 12:40, and there will be lunch provided as well. Okay? Cool. Anything else, Jared? Good. All right. Well, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guests, the Brooks family. Can we get one more round of applause? The biggest round of applause. He said, let's go.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you so much. How's everyone doing? Good. I just want to introduce ourselves real quick. I am Richard Brooks. My wife, Tori, is there in the back. She's going to share a little bit later. And this is our daughter, Carice. She loves youth group. Actually, she loves anyone that's younger than like 20. So, yeah. So you guys fit the bill, yeah. So we are missionaries to Belgium. What do you guys know about Belgium? Anything? Waffles? Anything else? Chocolate? I'm hearing that from my daughter, but yes, chocolate is huge in Belgium. So we actually brought some Belgian chocolate for everyone tonight. Yeah? Yes?
I go there.
Yeah, we were there November. Yeah? Yeah, hey. So yeah, we have chocolate for you guys after service at our table out there. So you guys have to try some. It is the best chocolate in the world. Belgians also invented the French fry. And so French fries are actually Belgian by French-speaking Belgians. So that's what it is, yeah. Are you Belgian or French? Oh, okay. Me too. So I just wanted to start sharing a little bit about who we are and how we kind of came to be missionaries. So we both went to North Point Bible College, which is in Massachusetts. It's an Assemblies of God Bible college. And while we were there during our junior year, we had a missionary come from the Netherlands. And she was sharing a story with us. And the story that she shared with us was when she first moved to her village, to her city that she was going to, she was meeting her neighbor for the first time. And as she was meeting her neighbor, she was just explaining who she was and what she was doing there. Because what you'll hear a lot in Europe is, why are you here? Especially if you're an American. They're like, why aren't you still in America? Why would you come here? You get that question a lot. And so she asked that question. She says, well, I'm a Christian, and I'm just here to work with kids as a missionary. And I'll never forget what the response of the neighbor was to this missionary. She said, oh, you're a Christian. I met one of those once. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that someone had only met a Christian one other time in their life in this continent where there is a church around every single corner. There is literally a giant cathedral in the middle of every city, and yet this person had only met a Christian one time, and I couldn't believe it. It broke our hearts, and we said, God, we'll go. So now we're missionaries to the Dutch speakers of Belgium, which is northern Belgium. We're going to be going there, and we're going to share some of the things that we do. But one of the biggest challenges of Europe is that less than 3% of Europeans claim a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. That means 97% of Europeans don't know Jesus. There are so many people in Europe that still need to hear the gospel. And it can feel like such a huge challenge. It can feel so difficult because we're a family of 3 going into a place where there are so many people that still need to hear. And it feels like a huge challenge. And what we wanted to share with you guys tonight, as well as our story, is we wanted to share about David and Goliath. Everyone probably knows this story, right? This is the story of David being the little guy fighting the giant Goliath. And so we're going to have the scriptures on the screen, but if you have your phone or your Bible, if you're old school like that, feel free to open up or follow along just on the screen. We're going to be in chapter 17, starting with verse 41. This is what it says. Meanwhile, the Philistine, with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome. And he despised him. He said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. "Come here," he said, "and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals." In your life, you're going to face giants. No matter what you do in life, there are going to be obstacles that you'll have to go through. And what we see in these verses is that those obstacles are bigger than us. They are bigger than us. The first statements that we see, he talks about his shield bearer being in front of him, and he's coming closer and closer to David. So he's got the shield bearer. He's probably covered from head to toe in armor, and he's got very few weak points. He looks like something impossible to stop. He looks that way. And this idea of coming closer is basically Goliath kind of knows it. He knows he's the big dog. Like, he knows he's the one that no one can stop. And so he's coming on the scene kind of leisurely, walking up to David. At one point, it seems like he's actually sitting down because he doesn't think David can do anything. And he looks David over. It says that David comes up. He looked David over and saw that he was little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome. Now, I would typically think that handsome would be a compliment, right? So he's like, "Hey, you're pretty good looking," which is a little weird to begin with. But the idea that he's presenting here is that you look like a kid. Like, you don't have any experience in war. You're not battle hardened. You're not someone who's been around the block and knows what's going on. You're not someone who knows how to fight someone like me. I have experience. I know what I'm doing, and you don't. And he's challenging David in this sense of saying, "Look at me. There's nothing you can do to me. I am stronger than you." That's ultimately what he's saying. And when he says he despised him, it's this idea of looking down. And he is a giant, so he's literally looking down. But the idea is he sees David as not an opponent at all. He doesn't see David as worth anything. That he is just there, and he's going to lose, and there's nothing that can change that. And then he says to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. Now, how many of you guys have pets? Does anyone have a dog? Like half the people here have a dog. So we use dogs as pets now. We love our dogs, and for some of us, they're like a member of the family, right? Well, in this time, yeah, Grandma does have one. In this time period, dogs were kind of seen as like servants in a sense. They were the ones that ate the leftovers from the table, that kind of cleaned up all that, and they were just less than. They were seen as less than. And so Goliath here is saying, "Do you think I'm nothing? Do you think I'm worth nothing? You don't see me as this giant who's battle ready, and you're looking at me like, what can you do?" He's challenging David and saying, "You're mocking me. You're mocking me by sending such a runt to fight me." That's how he views David and how he views Israel ultimately, because he's saying, "You're a runt. You're supposed to send your best warrior to challenge me, and this is the best you have, this little guy here." But then he makes this statement where he says he cursed David by his gods. He cursed him by his gods. All of a sudden, something changes here. It's no longer a battle between two people, but now Goliath is saying, "My gods are stronger than you. My gods will give me the victory over you and your God." That's ultimately the challenge that he makes to David and the statement he makes. And that's why he says, when he says that last line, "Come here," he said, "and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals." to be left in the wilderness, so that once you're killed, to be left there so that the birds and the wild animals eat you, meant you weren't buried. You didn't receive a proper burial. And in this time period, to not be buried was a sign of disrespect, ultimate disrespect. And so Goliath is here saying, you're nothing, your God is nothing, and I will defeat you and your God, and I won't even break a sweat. That's basically what Goliath is saying in these verses. And what he's being described as, he's being described as something impossible to stop. That's one of the challenges. Can I have the jars? That's one of the challenges that we face in Europe. Like I said, less than 3% of Europeans have a personal relationship with Jesus. And I want to illustrate this. If you can put the next picture up. I have the jars here, but it might be a little easier to see. This jar here represents the United States. Now, this is the whole of the United States. Here in the Northeast, it tends to be lower in the percentages. But roughly, there are 27% of Americans who have a personal relationship with Jesus. That means when you go to school, when you go to the store, when you go and play sports, roughly 3 out of every 4 people have no relationship with Jesus. So we have work to do, right? We have people that we can share the gospel with right here in our own town. This is the problem that Belgium has. Belgium has 1.5% of its population that has a personal relationship with Jesus. That means in certain villages and in certain cities, there is nobody that can share the gospel with them. We call this the gospel access crisis, because what it means is there are people who could live their entire life without ever running into another Christian. That's why God is sending us as missionaries, so that we can go and share the message of hope with these people who have never heard it and may never get another chance. They may never have another opportunity. And it looks impossible. Right now, including our family, there are roughly 15 individual people in the northern part of Belgium as missionaries. Roughly 15, including kids, spouses, all of that. But it's a population of 6.9 million people. It looks like an impossible thing that 15 people could move in a population of 6.9 million people and see something happen. It looks impossible. It's this giant that has to be faced. It's this giant that has to be faced, that presents itself to us and to all of us. We have just an illustration that we want to give you guys. And this is just for you personally. There are things in our lives. My wife's going to pass around a few note cards and pens. But what I want you to do is think about, what are things in your life that seem impossible? Maybe it's a relationship that you have with a family member. Maybe that family member doesn't believe in Jesus, and you've been praying and you've been hoping that they would, but they just seem to keep rejecting them, to keep rejecting him. Or maybe it's a friend at school that isn't believing in Jesus either. And you're seeing like this might be too difficult. What I want you to do is write those things down, as well as maybe there's things in your life, like there's a sickness in your family that just doesn't seem like it can be cured. Or maybe it's even a sin in your life that you keep wrestling with and you feel like you can't get out of. I just want you to take a couple minutes, not even a couple minutes, a couple seconds, and just write down some of those things where you're saying, God, this looks impossible. This looks so big that I can't do this on my own. It looks too big for me to do on my own. So just a couple another 20, 30 seconds, and then I'm going to move on. And you can keep writing. So it's things like maybe someone's sick in your family and the doctors don't have good news. Or maybe it's you have a friend who just doesn't want anything to do with Jesus. And you're saying it's just so hard to be able to share with them. So again, feel free to keep writing if you have some things. Once you're done, just fold it up and keep it with you. And there's going to be something else we'll do at the end. But I'm going to move on to the next part of the passage. So in verse 45, the next verses, it says this: David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." So he makes this statement. The first thing is Goliath speaking and reacting to David. Now David gives his response. And his response starts off by saying, "You are the Lord Almighty. You are in charge of this battle." What he says is, you, God, are the one who determines who will win this battle. He makes that statement from the get-go. And he says, "This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel." He starts off by saying twice, "this day." He steps up when he sees this impossible enemy. He starts off by saying, well, my God is the one that's in charge of this battle. And he says, this day, stepping out in faith, he says, I know that my God is more powerful and he will move today. He will speak today, and he is the one that's going to pull off this victory. He's trusting in God in this moment, and he's making it clear that the reason the Philistine will be defeated is because his God is greater. Not once in this passage does David say, I have the ability to take out this giant. The reason we have to acknowledge that the giant is impossible is because for us, it is. We cannot defeat our giants. You have to come to that realization first. We cannot save Europe. We cannot save our friends, but God can. And God is able. That's what we have to understand through this, is that David is not putting his trust in himself, but he is saying, my God is the one that can do this. My God is the one that's able. And he ends by saying in verse 47, all those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands. It is God who will bring the victory. It is God who will heal. It is God who will reach your friends and your family. It is God who will save you from the various sins that you feel trapped by. It is him who will bring you through it. I'm going to ask my wife to come up to share a story.
So one of the things that we didn't really get a chance to talk too much about was in Belgium, there are 3 national languages. So depending on where in the country you live, they speak a different language. They have different church denominations and fellowships, and there's a lot of differences depending on what language you speak. And with the Dutch speakers, that's really who we feel God is calling us to minister to, and their churches are really struggling. There's about 40, what would be similar to the Assemblies of God churches and in that entire area, and most of them have 15 people or fewer, and many of those churches don't even have a pastor. So it's been a very discouraging time for them, as a lot of churches have had to close their doors recently. And in the 2 years that we were living there, towards the end of that time, we finally had an opportunity to go to one of our local Dutch churches. And we went in just a normal Sunday. I think it was like the spring, so probably around a little bit before Easter time. But we just walked in, and our Dutch is not there. Like we're very, very beginners in the language, and we're just kind of like looking around. We don't really know what's going on. But luckily, a lot of Dutch speakers speak English, which is really convenient. So there was an elder at the church who came up to us, and they were talking to us. And they're just like, kind of like he was saying, what are you doing here? Very weird to see a lot of Americans, unless they're tourists, living there. And we just shared our heart. We're like, God really placed a burden on our heart for the people of Flanders. And come to find out, the night before, he had a dream. And he had a dream that there were people who were coming to this church. And he was like, no offense, it was more than just 3. It was many people that he had in this dream, but it was a prophetic dream. And as we were talking to him, he was like, this is just such a confirmation for me that God has not forgotten Flanders. God has not forgotten my neighbors and my community, because he called you in America to come here. And we believe that that is going to be, that you're just an answer to our prayer. And it was just an encouragement and a testimony to him that God is still on the move. So our trust in God, that inspires other people's trusts. Like with David and the Israelite army, they had been there for days, and no one was willing to challenge the Philistines. They were all afraid, but David had the courage to trust God, and he stepped up, and he said, no, God can do this. God's got this. So hopefully most of you are done. We're gonna bring envelopes around. I guess I can do that as soon as I'm done. But put your papers into your envelope. We're going to pray over them a little bit later, and we're going to give our giants to God.
And as you're finishing up, I want to teach you 2 Dutch words to show you the easiness of Dutch and the difficulty of Dutch. Okay? Is everyone ready? Your first really difficult word in Dutch: water. Can you say that? Water. The Dutch word for water is water. So now you know one Dutch word, right? Now I'm going to teach you a really easy word in Dutch, okay? So this is an easier one. Verpleegkundige. Verpleegkundige. It means nurse in Dutch. So you can see Dutch can have some easy things to learn. It can also have some really hard things to learn. So Dutch is a very interesting language. We're going to look at the last 2 verses now, but the best way to show these verses is to act it out. So I need someone, no offense, but someone shorter, middle school, somewhere around there to play David, and I need someone tall to play Goliath. All right. Yeah, you look tall. You can come up. You want to come up? Okay. All right. So you guys can stand right here in the front. Okay. Back up a little bit. All right. So we're gonna just illustrate the story a little bit, okay? Can you scoot forward just a little? All right, perfect. So, again, how many have heard this story probably a lot of times at this point? You've probably heard the story of David and Goliath a lot. Okay. Well, I'm just going to show you what happens, okay? So, you're David. he starts to whirl it up, right? You're getting ready to sling the stone. Yeah, what? A stone, yeah. Pretend like you're getting ready to throw it, okay? And my hand is going to be the stone, all right? And you're going to get hit by the stone. I'm not going to hit you, but pretend like the stone hits you and then react to it, okay? So I'm going to come like this, come close, and then you just react. Ready? Okay, spin. Faster, faster, fast. Okay, perfect. Whoosh. Boom. What happens? He got it right. Perfect. Now, how many of you, first, thank you, actors. Give them a round of applause. I need you up here. Well, actually, you can sit. Okay. So he actually did it perfectly, right? Now, let me ask you a question. If you get hit in the head with something, what way do you fall typically? Backwards, right? Usually, the way physics works is if you get hit by something and you're not moving, you start to move with the thing that's moving. Now, let's read the text. This is what it says in verses 48 and 49. As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down to the ground. What happens here is God proves that he is the only God in the world and that no giant can stand against him. Physics says he's supposed to get hit in the head and fall back. But here, what God does is he takes Goliath and he shoves Goliath into the stone and shoves him face down to the ground. What a lot of commentators and people will say is that this is, in a sense, worship to God. What God does is it's not David who kills Goliath. It's God. God pushes Goliath into the stone so that he falls face down. What we see in this entire passage, in this entire story of David and Goliath, is not the idea that David was strong enough. It's not the idea that David had what it took to be able to defeat Goliath. But it's that he trusted in the God who was able. He trusted in the God who could defeat Goliath and the Philistine army. When it comes to what we're doing in Belgium, that's exactly the God that we have to trust in. Because our giant is way too big for us to defeat. He is way too big. But God is bigger. And he's bigger in your lives. Tori's going to come up to close. And she's going to share one final story of how God moved in someone's life whom it should have been impossible for them to change.
I've been working with an anti-human trafficking ministry in Antwerp, and that's in Belgium. And we have been there for about 13 years. Not us. The ministry has been there for 13 years, and we end up seeing a lot of the same people over the course of that time. Now, one of the unfortunate realities of some of the people who we minister to is they've been told things like you're unforgivable, that you are have done the unpardonable sin, and that there's no hope for you. Sometimes it's by family members, sometimes it's been from pastors. So there's a lot of scars on their hearts, and they're very, very hesitant to the gospel because of it. Now, there's this one particular individual, it's been probably like 10 years, whom we've been ministering to her, and she's been here on and off in that time, and she's heard the gospel message. She has she's felt our love and our acceptance, and she's just, those lies have just really been deep, deep in her heart. And I really love that you guys do Speed the Light, because now, as a teenager, I gave to Speed the Light. And on the flip side of this thing, I get to see it in action. So we have this awesome TV. Do I have a picture of no? Yeah. So this awesome TV here. There's a lot of languages, like I was saying, in Belgium. So it's a lot easier for us to do our devotion and have it translated like we do it in advance and just translate it and then watch it. And that was a Speed the Light purchased TV. Thank you. Can't think of words today. That was a Speed the Light purchased TV that we use for our ministry to do our devotions. And we were watching the devotion that night. And we were talking about the prodigal son. And as we were discussing and as we were studying the scripture, this woman who we've been ministering to for all of these years, she had this epiphany. When the prodigal son comes home and his father sees him from a long way off, and he runs after the prodigal son who's done all of these horrible things, selfish things to his father, but is embraced with that kind of extravagant mercy and forgiveness. We're having this conversation, and it's like her heart is yearning for that to be a truth in her life. And she's like, wait a second. If this is supposed to be a picture of my Heavenly Father, then maybe there's hope for me. Maybe I can be forgiven. Maybe this forgiving God, this gracious God, can be gracious and merciful for me. And that night, she gave her heart to Jesus. 2 nights later, we had our next Bible study, and she shows up glowing. She has had this experience and this encounter with God, and she's changed. And we're having our next discussion, our next Bible study, and people around the room, they notice something about her. And during the course of our discussion, she says, yeah, I gave my heart to Jesus on Tuesday. And they're like, wow, that could happen to you. That could happen for me. If there's hope for you, then there's hope for me. And 2 more individuals that night gave their hearts to Jesus. Up until that moment, she had heard the truth, but it was in that moment where the Holy Spirit was working in her heart. God was moving in a way where she was ready to receive it, and those other ladies too. Not only will God move in your life, but when he does, he can inspire others around you that he can work in their lives too. So for the next couple minutes, I want you to take your giants in your hand. We're going to be praying for our giants. We're going to be praying that God is going to give us breakthrough, and that when we get breakthrough, we're going to be able to inspire others around us. We're also going to take this time to pray for our schools. Like we were saying, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. There are a lot of people who do not know Jesus. So we're going to be praying for our schools and our classmates who need to know the Lord.